Hey guys, welcome back, it's Meg. Today we're going to be going over what your Mythic Plus overalls should look like for healing and for damage, as well as a few things that could influence your overall and why it may look different. Our breakdowns can vary a lot due to the dungeon, routing, the gear that we're using, the comps, weekly affixes, talents, and just general comfort with the spec, but typically your top 3 is going to be the same for both healing and damage. For your damage breakdown, most of the damage is going to be coming from spinning crane kick. This can be anywhere from 20% of your overall to 40%, depending on the factors that we mentioned earlier. This is mostly due to the tuning on the fact that 4 or more targets, spinning crane kick does the most damage, and most packs are 4 or more, or you're pulling multiple packs together, especially as you get into higher keys when you're starting to worry about the timer. Your second and third are either going to be Blackout Kick or Zen Pulse. The determining factor here is the amount of AoE. So for example, Dragonflight Hollow is a huge dungeon for AoE, and Zen Pulse should be coming out higher than Blackout Kick. Whereas a dungeon like Vortex Pinnacle or Underrot, you could expect to see Blackout Kick higher. Resonant Fist is another second place contender, and this is also more dependent on AoE, just like Zen Pulse is. Blackout Kick and Zen Pulse are both highest damaging abilities for 2 to 3 targets, but Zen Pulse is not target capped, so if there's a lot of 2 or 3 target packs or 2 to 3 mobs with uneven health pools, Blackout Kick could represent higher than normal but still under Spinning Crane Kick. If you are still using the Onyx Ring or DPS trinkets like Beacon, those will usually be around second or third as well. The borrowed power options are super strong, so depending on whether or not you are running additional damage options, you could see Blackout Kick and Zen Pulse pushed down, but if you're not using those, then they will be around second or third. Third, fourth, and fifth are usually taken by Rising Sun Kick or Resonant Fist, depending on those higher abilities and any borrowed power you're using. And typically tyrannical dungeons will see Rising Sun Kick being higher, as well as dungeons with smaller packs or lieutenant type mobs. This is an example of a tyrannical Dragonflight Hollow breakdown. This is a big AoE dungeon. My stones in this screenshot are not combined, but if you combine them they would be about 10 mil, which is my second spot. We've got Spinning Crane Kick at number 1, my Primordial Stones at number 2, which would make Zen Pulse and Resonant Fist 3 and 4. This Zen Pulse is with Echoing Reverberation. You run this in Brackenhide because there is so much AoE, you really want to take advantage of that. And this is something that you're typically going to be seeing with a big AoE dungeon. You've got Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick much lower because most of the packs in here are more than 4 mobs. This is a Tyrannical Underrot breakdown. You can see Spinning Crane Kick is still number 1, although it is doing about 10% less than it was in that bigger AoE dungeon. Blackout Kick and Rising Sun Kick are representing better in this dungeon because there are more pulls where you're not going to have 4 targets or more. The same goes for Resonant Fist and Zen Pulse, those are both representing lower just due to less AoE. I also decided to use Tyrannical Weeks for both of them just because that means that you're going to have less Spinning Crane Kicks and more single target rotational abilities, but you can assume that your damage will be higher on Fortified Weeks since we have higher AoE than we do single target. Ancient Teachings or Awakened Phalanx should always be your highest heal overall. I don't think that I've done a dungeon yet where one of these wasn't the highest. Ancient Teachings will be higher most of the time, I would say 6 out of 8 dungeons. The 2 exceptions to this are Brackenhide Hollow and Underrot. You would likely see Awakened Phalanx higher. Third highest is Shaylin's Gift, especially if you are running Veil of Pride. Fourth close behind Shaylin's being Enveloping Mist. These are almost entirely from your Celestial windows and they're not being hardcasted. I would say about 75 to 85% of this is from your Celestial window, and the rest of it is either triggering Echoing Reverberation for Zen Pulse, or if you are under heavy AoE damage and you're using it to triage, but that one isn't super common. Fifth could either be Vivify or Gust of Mist. Most of the gusts are going to be from Chi rather than our normal mastery procs. This is mostly dependent on the mastery that you're running, but if you run close to what I have, it would be around the 5th to 7th highest with all things considered. And then after that, that's where all of your hots and smaller cooldowns come in, like Renewing Mist, and that will vary depending on how good you are with your uptime and using them on cooldown, as well as Life Cocoon and Chi Cocoon. For Brackenhide specifically, you're most likely going to be seeing Awakened Phalanx being the top just because of the layout of the dungeon and the pulls. Ancient Teachings typically is around 20 to 25, maybe even 30% of your overall, but you can see it's been pushed down a bit here just because Awakened Phalanx is so good in this dungeon. Enveloping Mist is up next. That is just from GG mostly, as well as triggering your Zen Reverberation. Gust of Mist, that is also mostly GG, but they are combined in details now. And then Shaylin's is actually way lower than normal just because there's not really any situations where you're going to be using it outside of maybe the first boss and maybe the last boss. Overall, Brackenhide's a pretty low throughput dungeon, so Awakened Feline is going to do a lot of the work here. This is a bit more of a normal breakdown. You can see Ancient Teachings is back on top at around 20%, and Awakened Feline is still doing a lot of healing. It's just not going to be as oppressive as it is in dungeons like Brackenhide. Shaylin's Gift is representing higher here because you have things like Krogmaw and the last boss that you're going to be wanting those big jumps of HP. Enveloping Mist and Gust of Mist again in that 4th and 5th spot, pretty much just from your Celestial Windows, and then you've got everything else filling in under that. So there's some variation between the 3rd and the 5th or 6th spots, but generally the first 3 are always going to be Ancient Teachings, Awakened Feline, and Shaylin's Gift. So, if your breakdown is not even close to these, there is a few things that could contribute, and there is mistakes as well as factors outside of your control that could be causing this. You could be running a different build. If you are running something that isn't even close to what I'm running, then this breakdown is not going to work for you as a reference. This is what I found to be the best for damage and for healing, and this is generally what I recommend. But again, if you're not running something close, then your damage and your healing is going to look much different. Routing can also contribute to different breakdowns. Typically, if you're not double pulling packs, you're going to see lower damage from Zen Pulse and Spinning Crane Kick, and higher from Blackout Kick or Rising Sun Kick. Or if you avoid single mob pulls, you're going to see some higher overalls in general. Comfort level in the dungeon and for the spec can also make it look different, basically knowing when you can continue to do damage and use Ancient Teachings and Awakened Feline to heal people, versus panic healing with Vivify or Shaylin's. This is also going to affect your damage and your healing breakdowns. If you are more comfortable with using your damaging abilities to heal, your damage overall is going to be higher, but if you're casting more, it is going to be lower. Pugs are a big factor as well, or people just not doing what they need to do. You may be forced to cast more if you're playing with people who don't know the mechanics or simply don't do mechanics, which could result in additional throughput required. But typically, I don't really like to include this point most of the time because I disagree with the concept of playing the game differently because other people won't do their job. So my actual recommendation for this is to just let them die and let them learn, because if they don't die, they're not going to realize what's killing them. And obviously this is just for avoidable damage. Please don't just refuse to heal people. Borrowed power is another big factor. I mentioned this earlier, but the damage trinkets and the DPS ring are contributing a lot of damage to healers currently, and if you don't have these, you could see a difference in your overall versus others with the trinket. This doesn't have anything to do with our actual build, and it's unfortunately down to loot luck, but it is something to keep in mind. It's also worth mentioning that the primordial stones are going to be doing 40% less damage in 10.1.5. Affixes are also going to contribute to healing and damage overalls in the sense that sometimes you'll have to heal more, like during bursting or afflicted weeks, or you're going to have to do more single target damage like on tyrannical weeks versus fort weeks, and this can also affect your route. So like I said, lots of things can contribute to different overalls, in addition to a few things being 1 or 2 places higher or lower depending, but generally the top 3 are the big ones and those should stay the same. I hope that this video was helpful. If you guys have any comments or questions, feel free to ask in the comments or on Twitch or Discord. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.